the tail that wags.
Hey everybody, I could not let October go by without doing an episode of Let's Talk Breeds. Now, October's dog is the Greyhound. The Greyhound has a long and fascinating history. It's the oldest breed. This dog is the only dog to be mentioned by name in the King James Version of the Bible, and the first dog to be mentioned in literature. Those are just a few things you're going to learn today. But I first have to apologize for the last couple of weeks being sporadic because I went on vacation and a couple things to do. But everything is back on track. I have a couple of great videos that I think you guys are going to like in the next couple of weeks. And I hate to do it, but Sunday seems to be the best day for me to put out the best videos for everybody. Okay, let's get into it. As I said before, the Greyhound is the oldest breed. Its ancestors are thought to go back to 8,000 years before Christ. That's a real long time ago. Now, Greyhounds are a part of the Sighthound family. That's different from the Scent Hound family. Scent hounds are like basset hounds or bloodhounds. In order to get their prey, they get the scent of the prey and they go taking that scent until they find them using endurance. The Sighthound has keen sight, which when they find their prey, they see them and they run until they catch them. Now, the Greyhound is the fastest dog on the planet. They can go up to 45 miles per hour. That's really fast. Think about it. Most country roads, the speed limit is 40 miles an hour. That's pretty good speed. So think about you're driving down the road about 40 miles an hour and you look and your family dog is passing you by to get to your house. That's how fast Greyhounds are. No one knows for sure why this breed is called Greyhound. It's thought the name came from the late Middle Ages from the term Greyhound, translated dog hunter. Another possible origin comes from the Latin word grey or gradus, meaning first rank among dogs. Although gray-colored greyhounds are called blue today and are very rare, it is thought there were more greyhounds in the ancient times, which may also be where the name came from. But greyhounds come in many colors, as you can see on this chart. There are 8 types of greyhound: the Italian greyhound, the whippet, the Spanish greyhound or the galgo, the Saluki, the Afghan hound, the Borzoi, the Scottish deerhound, and also the Arabic greyhound, and I'm not quite sure why it's not on this chart. The Italian greyhound is a toy version of the greyhound. Now, I know a little bit about this breed. One of my dogs, Cruz, is an Italian greyhound. He's a loving and ultra-loyal companion. When one decides that you are one of their people, they stick by you for the rest of their lives. You can see Cruz here next to his Jack Russell buddy Stitch. This kind of gives you an idea of the size and build of this dog, but they're wonderful. The Whippet is an English greyhound with medium build. They specialize in rabbit hunting and are especially used to compete in races, as the Whippet has the fastest acceleration time, and they're also called snap dogs. The Spanish Greyhound has a thick chest, long legs, and they're the dog that can run up to 45 miles per hour. They're typically the ones you see on the dog track. Now, they were bred to hunt rabbits in Spain. I know a little about Spanish Greyhounds as well. One of my dogs, Gracie, before she passed away at the ripe old age of 14, used to come to my house on a regular basis, and she was a lovely dog. I'll show you some more video and talk about her a little bit more towards the end of the video. The Saluki, or Persian Greyhound, is the royal dog of Egypt. They're one of the oldest varieties, and this elegant dog was bred to hunt wild animals. The Afghan Greyhound is a stunning dog with a long, silky coat. They are incredibly intelligent, and these pups are bred for dog shows and beauty pageants. They're not as fast as the other dogs, but they sure are pretty. The Borzoi, or Russian Greyhound, has Arabic origins. It has long, wavy hair, typically with spots. They were bred to hunt wolves as well as rabbits. The Scottish Greyhound, or Deerhound, has an uneven, shaggy gray coat. Now, this guy is incredibly agile and first bred to hunt foxes. And now we have the Slogi, or Arabic Greyhound. They're from Morocco, Tanzania, Libya, and Saudi Arabia. They're nicknamed the Lord of all dogs and the dogs of all lords. They were with the nomadic tribes for hunting and protecting game. They can run up to 34 miles per hour. Pretty fast. In biblical times, dogs weren't held in high esteem. However, the Greyhound is the only breed mentioned by name in the Bible. Proverbs 30:29 through 31 in the King James Version says, "A greyhound, and he-goat also, and a king against whom there is no rising up." Throughout history, greyhounds were only owned by royalty and noble figures. It began in ancient Egypt. The greyhound was thought to be part of the god Anubis, the god of death and everything that had to deal with death, including the afterlife, mummification, tombs, and the underworld. In the family, greyhounds were so celebrated, a greyhound's birth was second only to the birth of a son. And when the family greyhound died, the family would mourn this pup, shaving their entire bodies, including their eyebrows. Again, this dog was mourned second only to the death of a son. They were mummified and buried with their owners. If someone killed a greyhound, they would be condemned to death. Now, that's right, in my opinion. And famous pharaohs, including Cleopatra, owned greyhounds. The Greeks were thought to have purchased greyhounds from the Egyptians before 1000 BC. As a result, the first dog named in Western literature was the greyhound. In the Odyssey, Odysseus fought the Trojan War for 20 years. He returns home disguised, but his greyhound, Argus, is the only one to recognize him. Furthermore, greyhounds accompanied the Greek gods in Greek mythology. Greyhounds were then passed from the Greeks to the Celts and then to the Romans. Romans called greyhounds Celt hounds. Several of Romans' gods had greyhounds as pets. Celts and Romans were the first cultures to use greyhounds for coursing. Coursing is the sport of hunting small game like hares with sighthounds, particularly greyhounds. The goal was not to kill the prey, but to test and judge the ability of the dogs. Even during the Middle Ages, greyhounds were treasured. During this time in history, dogs were disliked and greyhounds had nearly become extinct. However, clergy protected greyhounds and bred them for nobility. King Hal of Wales made killing a greyhound punishable by death. Greyhounds were always owned by royalty and aristocrats, but King Canute of England established in 1014 that any commoner owning a greyhound would be severely punished and the poor dog's toes would be mutilated so he couldn't hunt again. Mary, Queen of Scots, Elizabeth I, and Henry V all owned greyhounds. Greyhounds were the first dogs mentioned in English literature. They were also mentioned in the Canterbury Tales, and Shakespeare also wrote about greyhounds. Greyhounds were the first dogs to be brought to America. Christopher Columbus brought greyhounds with him on his second expedition in 1493. After 1700, commoners in Britain were allowed to own greyhounds, and they brought their greyhounds with them when they immigrated to America. Like most dogs, greyhounds worked on the plains as hunting and guarding dogs. Greyhound racing began in 1919. The first commercial track was in Emmaville, California. Owen Patrick Smith designed and patented the mechanical lure. It was thought to be more humane than a live animal during a race. In 1930, there were 67 Greyhound racetracks throughout the U.S., and every one of them were illegal. Greyhounds grew scarce at this time, so one dog was forced to race several times a day. Dogs were drugged, races were fixed, and dog racing was associated and funded by the mafia. Dog racing was so controversial that it went to the Supreme Court. Church groups and humane organizations argued the gambling and treatment of the Greyhounds should keep dog racing illegal. The Supreme Court did not approve the races, but the states decided to get involved. Florida made dog racing legal in 1931. Dog racing was at its height in the 70s and 80s, and it was the sixth most popular sporting activity. But the controversy never went away. It still had its ties to criminal activity, and the treatment of the dogs were worse than they were in the 30s. Now, I won't get into the disgusting atrocities this sport has been guilty of, but drugging and injuries to these dogs got animal activists to expose the sport in the media. It was discovered that dog racing has no real regulations. Even convicted animal abusers are allowed to work with these greyhounds even to this day. In addition, any dog who couldn't make their team owners money were simply shot in the head. Americans were outraged by the treatment of these dogs. Programs were developed to rescue retired racers, dogs who lost races, and greyhounds who couldn't breed winners. Armed with this information, Americans lost interest in the dog tracks. So now that we've gone into the extensive history of the Greyhound, let's talk about some of the myths that Greyhounds have suffered. Myth: Greyhounds are not like other dogs. I'm not sure where this myth came from. As I said before, Greyhounds are the oldest breed, so they're kind of the original dog. There's nothing that says that Greyhounds don't behave in any other way than any other dog. You have to remember, these dogs have been exploited for their speed. So this whole thing about them acting like differently from other dogs, it's just not true. Myth: Greyhounds are dangerous around cats and small animals. Greyhounds are naturally gentle. There is a thing that they do called blooding in the racing world where they use a live animal to try to bait the greyhound into running and being a racer. A lot of greyhounds have been discarded because they won't race at all after they've been taunted with this animal. So the thing about it is, with greyhounds, they're just like any other dog. Some dogs like cats, some dogs don't. Some dogs see a gerbil and want to chase it, some dogs don't. So again, dogs are individuals and they don't always go with what the breed says. But greyhounds are no more dangerous to any other animal than any other dog. Myth: Greyhounds are dangerous because they wear muzzles. Because of the racing world, some state laws require that greyhounds wear muzzles. Greyhounds are gentle, cuddly sweethearts, and under that muzzle you might see is likely a softie. I'm not quite sure why a greyhound has to have a muzzle more than any other dog. I do know from research that I've done that sometimes when they're all together and they're about to race, they get really excited, so they kind of nip at each other. But that has nothing to do with your dog at home against other dogs. They're lovers. Myth: Greyhounds need lots of space and love to race. Many studies show that greyhounds are some of the best apartment dogs because they really like to get under the blankets and get cuddly and warm. I mean, they like to run and play like every other dog, but they really just need a good walk here and there every day, just like every other dog. Now remember, these dogs were forced to race. That's not necessarily what they want to do. Again, every dog is different, but by far of the standards of the greyhound, they're just a bunch of softies and they love to be cuddled and they just like to chill. These are pictures of Gracie, and it shows how much she likes a nice, comfortable place with warm blankets. I hope you enjoyed this brief study of the Greyhound. Greyhounds are beautiful, loving, intelligent, and loyal dogs. Their lineage is literally a huge part of human history. Above all, Greyhounds are wondrous companions. Again, if you want to adopt a Greyhound, please consider a former racer. Now, did I miss something or do you have more information? Please put it in the comments section. Now, don't forget to hit subscribe and the like button. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next week.